and let the BLM introduce themselves and get into their work tonight. So we are here for the San Pedro Riparian National Conservation Area Resource Management Plan Alternatives Development Meeting. So the objectives, which are at the top of your agenda for tonight, is a chance for the BLM to do some information sharing and share with you the draft range of alternatives that have been developed for this resource management planning process.
Mary Darling, on behalf of Cochise County and the City of Sierra Vista, the county is doing a tremendous amount right now with water recharge. They're studying it. They have 3 projects that are actively going on. And then, as most people know, the city is doing quite a bit to restrict water use and put standards on new houses. So both are very active in getting what they can for more water into the San Pedro. They're also working closely with the Fort on that on a daily basis.
Alternative A, as I said, is no action, manage under the existing plans that we have right now, continue our current management. Alternative B is our resource use emphasis. It has the greatest diversity and extent of resource uses. Important to keep in mind that we don't have a lot of resource uses or traditional BLM resource uses that you would find in other larger planning areas. There's no mining in the NCA, it's not allowed. So our main resource uses are grazing and recreation. Along with the greater extent of resource use, we're going to allow for some hands-on restoration that's primarily going to be focused on the tributaries and the uplands. And we are going to have some of those protected designations, which are those acronyms that I tried to explain a few slides earlier. So we are going to have kind of a medium amount relative to the other 2 action alternatives of areas that will be managed for wilderness characteristics, VRM Class 1, and that sort of thing. Alternative C is what we termed the restoration emphasis. The goal there is to try to reach our desired national resource objectives as quickly as we can. It allows for hands-on restoration across the entire NCA, so it's not just focused on the tributaries and the uplands. It also allows for work in the main stem of the river. The resource uses would stay at about the current level they are now. This really does not have a whole lot in the way of any kind of protected designation, so under that alternative there's no areas managed for wilderness characteristics as an example. And then alternative D, that is the natural resources emphasis. So really that is trying to limit, natural processing emphasis, I apologize. So that is really trying to limit disturbance, man-made disturbance within the NCA. It has low levels of resource use, so there's no grazing under that alternative as an example. It has the most protected designations, so it's got the most areas that would be managed for wilderness characteristics, the most acreage that would be visual resource management class 1, and we are really looking to limit human impact and allow the area to recover on its own. That is the focus of that particular alternative.
Yeah, I know that when the Forest Service is going to do timber harvesting, they present a map to the public is exactly where these harvests are going to be. And I can only assume that maps have been made of water basin creation here. And you were asking about whether it's clear, and I think it would be much more clear to the public if we could see those maps.
Right now we don't have those maps. What we do have is an effort by our hydrologist to look at the whole national conservation area and the water data that we have and say, where are places where this might be a strategy that would be the most successful? And so when we come out with a draft plan, I don't think you're gonna see like, here is where we might put a recharge basin. Rather, you might see a broader geographic area that says in this sub-basin, the data showing this might be a good place to site a detention or recharge facility. But then what happens after this resource management plan level is you're going to get down to the site-specific implementation part of the plan, and that's where you're going to really see a point on the ground where you're going to do a project, and it will go through an additional NEPA analysis, an additional environmental assessment usually, that will look at the site-specific nature of that project.
So we could never really know how impacted these are going to be until that point.
I think that you're still going to be able to get an idea of that by, again, because we haven't developed this, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I think you can still get an idea of, based on in the analysis in the plan, we'll be looking at where other people have developed these and how, what the information that's available says about how effective those are. And then, the information that our hydrologist provides us and any literature and other resources that that person uses should be able to provide in the analysis how effective we think those would be in different locations.
Okay, this is a follow-up to that gentleman's question, and he was asking, I believe, about the availability of maps. And what I wanted to say is I'm a very visual person, so that hit me. That would be really helpful to me. And I don't require that this is a very detailed, perfectly set in stone kind of thing, but you mentioned, well, we gotta get input from the hydrologist and so on and so on. But if we could follow that, if we just had roughly what you're dealing with, that would be something I would be interested in.
What exactly constitutes restoration, and what would be the components, the restorative components, and how much emphasis would there be on whatever components there are?
So at the resource management plan level, when we're talking about restoration, we're talking about through existing baseline inventory data, assessments, and so forth. We determine that there's something that is not working quite right in the natural system, and we want to go out and restore that to try to get that function back.
I'm Mike here. Mike. I'm one of the allotment holders, and I'm very proud of what we've done on our allotment, and I'd love to show it to you, or to anybody else who'd like to see it. But my question is on the range restoration. As I drive in here tonight, there's still water in the bottom Kamari as it goes in Pachuca City. That's in 30 years I've been on the bottom Kamari. That's never happened at this time of year, and it's not because we got more rain. It's because the range restoration that was done upon the bottom Kamari Range. The spring on my allotment that has just popped up is because of the range restoration. Which plans call for the chemical treatment with WThion for range restoration?
I think you're asking which alternatives allow for chemical treatment on rangelands.
Yeah, okay, so I right now, my projection would be that alternatives B and C would both allow for that in the toolbox.
Alternative B mentions half of the sprinkler would be available for a broad use of restoration tools, including chemical, etc. And the remainder would be available as a forage reserve allotment of 38,740 acres. So since I don't have a map, I don't know where the current grazing areas are, and I don't know where the restoration tools are going to be used. So without a map, without a clue, how do I know if I'm for, how do I know which, I'm totally confused. I don't know where we're gonna put any of this, or,
Well, and the answer to it, the question was, the question was, she doesn't know on the ground where we're gonna put any of these things, so she doesn't know which alternatives she should be for. And again, we don't know specifically on the ground yet where all these, I don't know the exact boundaries of any of the treatment things yet. That being said, this idea of the forage reserve allotment, actually credit Mike a little bit for coming up with that proposal, is if we have ranches or other landowners in the watershed that want to do a treatment on their property and need a place for cattle to go for a short period of time while that treatment's going on, or if we want to use cattle as a tool, potentially, to do some things like fuel reduction, or if we want to help someone that a wildfire went across their ranch and they need a place to go for a little while and it didn't go on the San Pedro. That's the kind of idea for the forage reserve allotment. It's not an allotment that's allocated to a single rancher. It's an allotment that would be available to be used. And there's still a lot of details we have to figure out about this concept.
It's a great question. You're saying I can't have a fully informed opinion about some of these because I can't see it spatially, and we understand that. And that's why in some cases we don't even engage in this level of input because sometimes it's hard to explain some of these concepts. But we want to get your input before we do all the nitty-gritty work of actually laying that out spatially on the ground. And so if you've never looked at of the very exciting term of a draft environmental impact statement. It will have as much detail as you can stomach.
I wanted to know who the decision makers are. I assume your team is going to decide on the draft RMP, and then somebody higher up will decide what is adopted.
We're the decision makers. Who wants that?
Yeah, so the decision maker is the Tucson field manager, is the person who signs that, actually weighs those alternatives and looks at the analysis, and you're right to say that the draft is the whole team of people working on it, and the person that actually signs it is the Tucson field manager.
We'll, we're gonna take comment through, take your input through about June the 10th. That's when our last meeting is June the 9th. Please send me your input at those locations. If you want, as Adam said, if you want to have another meeting, talk to him, talk to me. I mean, we're gonna try to, we try to do this as efficiently as possible.